poor unfortunate souls in pain, in need. Those poor unfortunate souls, so sad, so true. Those poor unfortunate souls.
1991's The Little Mermaid for the NES is an anomaly given who made it and the time it was released. Put out by Capcom 2 years after the movie's release, but at the height of their phenomenal partnership with Disney during the NES's lifespan, Ariel's adventure wouldn't see the success of games like DuckTales or Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. The question is, though, should it be part of your world, or will it make you feel like a poor, unfortunate soul? This is Chiron Barron, guest narrating for Makopowered, and welcome to Weekend Rental, where we look at games that, while not widely considered classics, or sometimes even good, are still worth examining and maybe even playing despite themselves. So, the first question to ask when looking at this game is, why release a Little Mermaid game so late after the film's release? Wouldn't it have missed the boat? There are a few reasons, but we can't talk about any of it without discussing the film it's based on, because its impact cannot be overstated. It caused Oh, come on, Chris. Are you really going to make me read that too? Fine. The Little Mermaid caused a sea change for Disney and essentially saved feature-length animation. See, by the point of the film's release, Disney had suffered a string of failures at the box office. Movies like 1988's Oliver and Company and, perhaps most famously, or notoriously, 1985's The Black Cauldron had left Disney's feature animation department reeling. The Little Mermaid became their first animated box office hit since 1977's The Rescuers and... Again? Really? I'm not reading it, I'm not. Ugh. Fine, but that's the last one. And turned the tide, changing the direction of their animated releases going forward. This led to a string of bona fide classics, such as 1991's Beauty and the Beast, 1992's Aladdin, and 1994's The Lion King. So yeah, The Little Mermaid was kind of a big deal from an overall pop culture perspective, even 2 years after its initial release. Which is fine, but the question of why the game didn't release closer to the movie's theatrical run remains. I mean, DuckTales was released in 1989, and the average development cycle for an NES game during that period was significantly shorter than it is now, so why the delay? On the one hand, not releasing alongside the film makes sense. Considering how their animated features during that period had fared, a movie like this wouldn't necessarily have warranted taking the chance on a tie-in game right at release. The other reason? Well, we'll get into it in just a moment. First, though, let's talk about the fact that The Little Mermaid is one of the only two Capcom Disney NES games which have never gotten a remaster or re-release. Not you, Mickey Mousecapade. You don't count. You were made by Hudson. Aside from poor Ariel and friends, Adventures in the Magic Kingdom is the only other NES game from the heady days of the Capcom Disney collaboration never to get the remaster treatment. Every other Capcom Disney NES game got remastered, and re-released in a single collection to boot. Digital Eclipse's Disney Afternoon Collection. Not only did that collection get DuckTales and Rescue Rangers, but also Darkwing Duck, Tailspin, and even DuckTales 2 and Rescue Rangers 2. It makes sense that Adventures in the Magic Kingdom wasn't included. It was not based on a Disney afternoon cartoon. Not only that, but it was based on a theme park. Specifically, a particular version of that theme park from the 80s. Okay, fine, I get that. The Little Mermaid, on the other hand, could have been included as well, even if just on a technicality. Why would we say this? Because of the other reason that it makes sense to release a Little Mermaid game in 1991. Ariel got her own animated series just under a year later. The show lasted a total of 31 episodes across 3 seasons, all of which are currently available to stream on Disney+, and focuses on Ariel as a mermaid with her friends under the sea, regularly foiling Ursula the Sea Witch's schemes. The thing is, the NES game's plot kind of has more in common with the series than it does with the movie, which is also why it would have made sense to include it in the Disney Afternoon collection. See, the game's plot doesn't revolve around Ariel trying to win the heart of Prince Eric. That's already happened at this point, as indicated in the opening cutscene. Instead, the game begins with Ariel finding out that Ursula has gained the ability to control the minds of all the fish in the sea, minus, apparently, Flounder for some reason. Because of this, Ariel has to turn back into a mermaid in order to stop her. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. First, it is never explained exactly how Ariel turns back into a mermaid. It just happens. Does she just have this ability now? If so, it seems to only go one way because, spoiler alert, King Triton has to change her back into a human at the end of the game. Something we definitely need to come back to. Second, given that Ariel is with Eric at the beginning of the game, that implies that the events of the film have already happened, meaning that Eric has already killed Ursula by impaling her with the mast of a ship. So, how is she alive? Also, how did she get the ability to control sea life like Aquaman? I don't know, because none of this is ever explained. Oh, while we're on the topic, let's talk about Eric for a moment. Because he's, let's be nice and call it self-focused here. When Ariel finds out that her friends are in trouble and she needs to go rescue them, Eric begs her to stay with him and ignore the crisis. Holy crap, are you serious? That is some straight up evil royalty crap right there. Or just cishet dude crap. Remember that Ariel is only 16 years old and Eric is 18. That's not even taking into account that Disney aged her up for the movie. She was only 14 in the original Hans Christian Andersen story. I just love that Ariel is just like, yeah, I hear you. I'm gonna go do what's right and save my friends though, and leaves anyways. Which is just as good a segue as any to start talking about the gameplay itself. So, back in 2009, when the Happy Video Game Nerd reviewed every Disney Capcom game, his review of The Little Mermaid said,
Now I bet a lot of you never thought a game based on The Little Mermaid would be any good. And while it won't set your world on fire, it's actually pretty damn good.
While he has revisited the other games discussed in that video, he never came back to The Little Mermaid. Here's the thing though, it should set your world on fire, especially if you liked Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers on the NES, because the core combat mechanics are kind of lifted from that game. For one thing, Ariel can pick up seashells and either throw them or have enemies run into them, just like Rescue Rangers. Ariel's main attack in the game, though, is to throw bubbles at enemies, encasing them and allowing her to throw them at other enemies. It's essentially the same as the box throwing mechanic from Rescue Rangers, just by way of Bubble Bobble. Except way darker than either of those games if you stop to think about it for more than a moment. So, of course, we're going to do that. Sure, on the surface it looks like a standard quote-unquote girl game attack. Oh, she's just throwing bubbles. Who would be afraid of bubbles? Keep in mind though that this is a game that mostly takes place underwater, and that most of the enemies are water breathers. This means that being trapped in an air bubble underwater would essentially be a death sentence, causing these enemies to suffocate. Which they do! No really, Ariel and the player only have a limited amount of time to throw enemies who are trapped in bubbles before they expire and just drop on the ocean floor. On top of that, remember that these fish and other sea animals are attacking against their will because Ursula is controlling them, meaning that Ariel and the player are killing her innocent pawns. This may be the darkest Disney game, period, until either Aladdin or Gargoyles. It's just wrapped in bright pastel colors, which is an idea we need to talk about, but we'll come back to it in a moment. First, though, let's talk about how the game handles elements from the movie, because the way the developers handled it is interesting. The approach is similar to what we have discussed all the way back in the first episode of Weekend Rental with Dick Tracy. Interestingly, also a Disney movie game, where the game takes not quite from the movie, but of the movie tact. The sunken ship from the movie is here and even serves as an opening scene, just like in the movie. It comes complete with Glut, the shark from that scene, as the boss for the level. Here, however, it is the step towards confronting Ursula, rather than demonstrating Ariel's obsession with land dweller artifacts. Oh, quick aside, those are here too. Ariel can dig in certain sandbars using her tail in order to unearth shells to throw at enemies and treasure chests, as well as, and this is the manual talking here, dinglehoppers and snarfblats. Again, though, the game starts out with her as the surface dweller herself, so it's unclear why these items would hold the same fascination for her. Anyway, after the sunken ship and the ghost ship? You know what? It's got little fish wearing sheets pretending to be ghosts. I don't care if that wasn't in the movie, it's cute and it should have been. But yes, the ghost ship features Flotsam and Jetsam, Ursula's Barracuda pets, as the level bosses, which absolutely fits both the level aesthetic and the overall Little Mermaid-ness of the game. After that, though, the game takes a hard turn into video game stereotype territory, with an ice level and a fire level. No, I'm not kidding. Undersea ice and fire levels. The ice level, which is cleverly referred to as the Sea of Ice, does draw attention to another unique aspect to the gameplay, however. Ariel's movement. Considering the game takes place largely underwater, Ariel's movement is actually relatively unique. Sure, water levels have been a thing for a lot of NES games. Even the first Super Mario Bros. Had underwater levels, but the difference is a matter of natural habitat. Because Mario was not a water creature, the player had to constantly press a button to keep him swimming. Not here, though. The water is Ariel's home, so she moves fluidly along both the X and Y axis, without any repeated button presses by the player. No, that mechanic comes into play when she and the player have to jump out of the ocean. At that point, Ariel is literally a fish out of water and has to hop across dry surfaces in order to move. The ice level highlights that dichotomy, both because of the slippery physics on the ice floes present, and because this level is the only one to feature an above-water boss in the form of a walrus, which seems to have taken visual cues from old Mickey Mouse cartoons. Sadly, the fire level, dubbed the Undersea Volcano, isn't as interesting. It just has little volcanoes that spit projectiles. The boss here, though, weirdly enough, is the Royal Herald from the beginning of the movie, who has traded in his cravat for a sword and shoots fish from a cannon. I'm not entirely sure what's going on here either, but oh wait, this actually kind of makes sense. Not the fish cannon thing, that's still weird. I mean the Herald fighting Ariel. It makes sense because it demonstrates how Ursula is turning friends into enemies through her control. Okay, well played, Capcom. That's actually pretty cool. After this, the player takes the fight to Ursula, entering her castle, which is clearly taking design cues from Bowser's castle because it is structured as a maze. Great, love that. There is an extra layer of BS though, because the doors change once you go through them, meaning that going through a door and then going back through it does not return you to where you were, instead taking you to a different part of Ursula's castle. It makes the level frustrating to figure out, even though the enemies aren't all that difficult. There are some cool touches here though, like the husks of those poor, unfortunate souls Ursula sings about being environmental hazards, and the doors the player has to go to resembling the entrance to Ursula's lair from the film. The other cool thing about this level is the fight against Ursula herself. Oh, spoilers here, I guess. It's a two-part fight, with the first part being just Ursula commanding fish to attack Ariel. Again, this makes sense because it highlights the main plot device of the game, Ursula's control over all the fish in the sea. The second part of the fight pulls directly from the film though. Here, she has King Triton's crown and scepter, and in addition to needing to fight off fish, Ariel needs to be aware of how Ursula is controlling the ocean itself, changing the currents constantly throughout the fight, just like she did in the movie, just not to the same degree. It's not necessarily difficult, but it is a cool experience nonetheless, which is also a good way to describe the game as a whole. It's only 5 stages, none of them overly difficult, but all of them highlighting a new game mechanic in an enjoyable way to keep the game fresh throughout. The overall experience lasts just over an hour, but there is undeniable charm throughout. This brevity isn't why the game didn't get the same recognition as DuckTales or Rescue Rangers though. Let's be honest, neither DuckTales nor Rescue Rangers is particularly difficult, especially once you know what you're doing, and both are just as short as The Little Mermaid. All of these games offer comparable experiences in their given design, all lasting around an hour or so per game. So, if that wasn't the cause, what was? Well, there are 2 parts to this. First, the game was released for the NES in 1991, right in the middle of the hype for the Super Nintendo's launch in North America. Many NES games during this period kind of fell through the cracks as a result, some of which have been covered on the channel like Bucky O'Hare. The other reason is because, well, to be blunt, it was a game made for and marketed to girls in an area where video games were just seen as boys' stuff. The ad campaign focuses on Ariel, and the ad for the Game Boy version of the game, which is practically identical to the NES version, highlights that it's for girls and discusses eternal love in the first sentence. The game itself features vibrant colors, yes, but those vibrant colors are largely pastels. The only player character is Ariel herself. You do not play as anyone else throughout the entire game, which was an extreme rarity during that period. Your reward for completing the game is being reunited with Prince Eric, even if that's a dubious prize considering his behavior at the beginning of the game. Now, the argument can be, and has been, made that Nintendo themselves had strong female protagonists. Look at Princess Toadstool in Super Mario Bros. 2, or Samus in Metroid. I mean, okay, if you insist, let's talk about how those strong female characters were presented. First, sure, Princess Toadstool, which is what Peach was called when she was first introduced to North American audiences, was a playable character. And yeah, she had an ability that no one else got, because she could hover for a brief period. This was such a highlight that Helen Kennedy suggested the possibility of gender-fluid play when male players chose to play through SMB2 with her. There are 2 problems though. First, that hovering? Yeah, that's because her dress was acting as a parachute of sorts, so that's awkward. It's just playing to stereotypes about women and their clothing. Second, just because you could choose to play as Peach doesn't make her the main protagonist. She is still a supporting character, as evidenced by the fact that the end screen of the game only features Mario, no matter who you beat the game with. Add to the fact that Peach wouldn't be playable again in a mainline, not kart, party, or sports Mario title until this. This can't be right. Hey Chris, is this right? Okay then. She would not be a playable character again in a mainline Mario game until 2013's Super Mario 3D World for the Wii U, a full 25 years later. Every other Mario game in between there has her getting kidnapped by Bowser. Sure, Peach got her own DS game in 2005, 2006, which does play like a standard Mario game, but the core gameplay hook revolves around Peach getting overly emotional and needing to manage her emotions in order to solve puzzles and defeat bosses. That's not a great look. But what about Metroid? The Metroid series is known for their badass bounty hunter protagonist, Samus Aran, one of the strongest women in video games. Yeah, but let's look at how the original Metroid handled that, shall we? For one thing, you only find out that Samus is a woman at the end of the game. No wait, that's not fully accurate. You only find out Samus is a woman if you beat the game in under 3 hours. This means that, until it was revealed in gaming magazines of the era, most players wouldn't have known that Samus was a she. In fact, the manual wanted to hide the fact that Samus was a woman so badly that, throughout, it refers to Samus as he. Also, let's go back to that time requirement for discovering that Samus is a woman because there's an issue there. See, the reveal was treated as a reward, where the faster you beat the game, the more clothes Samus took off, with the best reward seeing Samus stripped down to her underwear. Great. How empowering. While this is an issue that we're going to need to come back to, The Little Mermaid was almost unique because of its unabashed focus on Ariel as the protagonist. Not to mention the actual care that went into the level design and gameplay mechanics. Keep in mind that this is still an era where the games targeted at girls were along the lines of Barbie, which was a slapdash effort by high-tech expressions. It does the bare minimum to be able to be called a game, and The Little Mermaid should have stood out by comparison. And it does, as long as you have a chance to play it and don't dismiss it as a game of Barbie's, quality. And that's the thing. These types of games were marginalized so badly and for so long that there was even a Games for Girls movement in the late 90s. It spurred the publication of one of the key early texts in video game studies, From Barbie to Mortal Kombat, just to address this gender disparity issue. Even then, the key exemplar of a good game for girls used throughout the book was Barbie Fashion Designer, software that allowed users to design and print Barbie's clothes. It was such an issue that, even looking back, it's hard to reconcile. For instance, this is the first weekend rental to feature a game with only a female player kit. Wait, really? You've been doing this for 5 years now, Chris? And this is the first time you've looked at a game with a solo femme player character? Come on, Chris, you can do better than that. Although, again, it highlights the issues surrounding why this game didn't and doesn't get the attention it deserves. Okay, right, before I forget, we need to talk about that ending again. Okay, so remember how I said that apparently Ariel's ability to change form only goes one way? Well, after she and the player defeat Ursula, Triton uses his trident to make Ariel human again, so she can return to Eric, just like in the movie. There's one key difference though. See, in the movie, when Triton changes Ariel into a human, he includes a tasteful shimmering dress, because it's a kid's movie. In the game, he, forgets to include the dress. I mean, she's still covered up because her hair is so long, but yeah. Shades of Samus's bikini, except, she's 16 and it's a game aimed at girls. The Little Mermaid is a game that manages to both emulate the formula that made Capcom's other Disney NES games successful, while at the same time offering a unique approach. The game's presentation, gameplay mechanics, and level of difficulty all offer an accessible and engaging experience, while also offering female and femme gamers a player character that they can see themselves in. It also breaks free of the stereotypes of so-called girl games being janky, slapdash affairs made for a quick buck. It deserves to be recognized alongside its better-known contemporaries and definitely makes for a good weekend rental.
If you haven't been to Disneyland lately, you and your family have a lot to catch up on.